We have a special offer for our faithful listeners. The promo code podcast20 takes 20% off the tuition for our exciting on-demand e-learning courses. The code is good through December 2024. The lineup includes classics like Smart Fitting, Smart Tailoring, and Smart Sewing Order by Kenneth D. Plus, you'll find courses by other trusted sewing instructors. You can count on Thread's expertise in these online, on-demand learning experiences. Check out the course lineup at threadsmagazine.com/e-learning, and don't forget to apply the code podcast20 for your 20% discount. Welcome to Sewing with Threads, the monthly podcast with the staff of Threads Magazine. I'm your host, Carol Frasia, and today I'm joined by Kenneth D. King, a longtime contributing editor to the magazine. Kenneth is well known in the sewing community, but for anyone who hasn't encountered him via his articles in Threads, his many video classes, or his delightful social media presence, let me introduce him briefly. In addition to serving as a professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, Kenneth travels the world to teach. He's also a couture designer with pieces in top museums, including the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and the Victoria and Albert in London. Kenneth's custom millinery pieces have been seen on the head of Sir Elton John, but today we're going to talk about an early and perhaps even more widely known inspiration for his designs, Barbie. Welcome, Kenneth.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. It's so nice to see you. Other people can't see you right now, but you look great, and it's so nice to talk to you.
Thank you. I would amend that not just Barbie, because I work with all sorts of 11.5-inch fashion dolls, as we refer to them. So Barbie was my initial inspiration. My Barbie's name was Estelle, but the cast of characters that I'm using there are different sources for them.
That I knew. And I know that you are about to publish a book with Taunton Press. And can you give us the little quick elevator pitch description? And, you can give out spoilers if you want to or not.
Okay. Well, it kind of, as with everything, in the introduction, I think I sent that to you, we talk about the power of stories. When I was a small boy in Salina, Kansas, I was a sissy boy and I was bullied quite a lot. And I started playing with, I traded my gun and holster to my sister for my Barbie. And my Barbie's name was Estelle. She went to the movies, she went to the theater, she went to the opera, she went to good restaurants, she had a convertible, she had a cool apartment. She had lots of evening clothes. So, because I wasn't buying the Mattel version of Barbie is a teenage fashion model. If you remember those clothes from the time, those were grown-up lady clothes. Those were not teenager girl clothes. So my Barbie was 27. Well, moving forward, in 2019, I was making Barbie clothes for my husband's niece in Australia, little Charlie. So it was decided little Charlie is old enough now, she needs some. So I started making things on my winter break, posting them to Instagram. And then there was this email from New York Magazine. The fashion editor said, "Oh, we love what you're doing. Can you replicate these 4 looks from the collections? We're doing an article on Barbie as influencer." Well, I looked at the photos. 2 of them were ugly, but 2 of them I really liked. I said, I only have time for 2. I want to do these 2, and I want this big, huge bushel basket full of money to do it. And they said, okay, can you have it done by the 15th? So that's where the character of my assistant came in. So if you follow me on Instagram, you occasionally, my assistant will show up. That is her name, my assistant. Well, moving forward, during the pandemic, one of the characters, Crazy Bella, was the subject of a blackmail attempt. I'm not going to go into it too much, but if you want to know the backstory, Lola the Showgirl 24 on Instagram. What I'm doing is I'm filling in Crazy Bella's backstory because I'm going to need it for the book. So I realized during the pandemic that something that a therapist years ago had observed. He said, given your background, you should have engaged in alcohol abuse, drug abuse, or suicide attempts. How did you dodge that? Well, it was a couple things. My mother had a lawyer who was the voice of reason in my life, and he was the one who had the "it gets better" talk with me even before that was a thing. The other thing was I hid out in my head in my bedroom making things, specifically doll clothes. So this whole Crazy Bella story spooled out on Instagram. I had people emailing me asking me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "This is how I'm coping." And it occurred to me that all those years ago, that's how I kept from engaging in perhaps maybe destructive behavior, is by making things. So that's the introduction to the book. The book is a storybook with sewing. And the main character, which we will get to meet on the back cover of the upcoming issue, as I understand, is Lola.
Yes, you will.
She was a showgirl. So in the Barry Manilow song, we leave her drinking herself half blind. I pick up her story from there and go forward. So at every plot point in the story, the outfits that Lola wears, we have the patterns to, we have the instructions. So it's a storybook with sewing. It's a long elevator speech, but there you have it.
That's great. And can you tell us what the title is?
The working title is Doll Couture, Creating Custom Clothing for the Story of Lola. Because I wanted on the cover, I wanted there to be the story of Lola, because the book is a story first. There is no other book out there like it. The only book that even came close was a book from, I want to say, the 1930s called the Mary Frances Sewing Book, where it was a story to teach little girls how to sew. Now, this book is not necessarily for the little girls, because it has a lot of, kooky characters in it, which you have seen on my Instagram. It has some new ones. And it deals with some, I don't want to say adult themes, because that's not quite right, but there's more to it than just we're playing with dolls here.
Right. And this isn't necessarily to teach people how to sew. It's to sort of give them an avenue for some sewing skills they have, I'm assuming.
Yes. And so there are the sections on, the tools you need, the fabrics, the interfacings, all of the equipment that will come in handy. And then it really is step by step. There are quite a few photographs in each little lesson. So they learn the basic panty, they learn pajamas, then there is the basic dress, there is a little top, little flare skirt, there's a dolman coat, trousers, and then a cardigan suit, 3 pieces, the jacket, the skirt, and the little blouse. Then the final scene is a cocktail coat and strapless dress. But these all slot into the plot points.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and I can see how easily this could bring back any adult sewer who had started out working with Barbie clothes to getting back into that mindset of, these clothes sort of represent what I wish I were wearing. I kind of remember that too, because I remember Barbie as being not a teenager. I thought of her as being sort of in her mid-20s also, and she was going to go to work. She was really smart. She had a job and she was going to work and needed some good business clothes. So that was sort of my thing. But yeah, I think we all had our dreams about it. But, going back to when you were saying that you would sort of hide out in your room and make these clothes, and that was how you coped with just all the things that were not really going right in your life. Why do you think it was the sewing of these clothes? What do you think about that was helping you kind of get out of the sort of bad headspace and into something that felt productive and that released a lot of the stress?
It was the stories, really. Mm-hmm. And really during the COVID, we have to look at the silver linings as they are in the COVID. For me, I was making videos for FIT and, Zoom classes so I could generate some income during the COVID. But the little stories that I had, the Crazy Bella, the first one, I realized, okay, this could be a thing, was Crazy Bella Goes for a Drive, because when they shut everything down, there were no cars on the street. So I could take her out in her little lilac colored vintage Cadillac and put her on Broadway and lay flat on the pavement on Broadway and not worry about getting run over because there was nothing happening. That kind of got me off on these stories again. So there was the Bella blackmail thing. There was, my assistant had to, because getting from my place to my husband's place, he's at 85th and Columbus, I'm at 18th and Broadway. It was an hour and a half walk because we didn't have the subways. So I had a whole photo story. One night, my assistant was boxing up Crazy Bella's performance clothes for her online concert. and she had to take them up to the Dakota at 72nd and Central Park West. So I got the little Ferrari, and I got her into the Ferrari with the little box with the address. And I did this whole essay, like Times Square. I could put the car out on the street, and I could lay flat on the pavement and photograph it so it looked like she was driving in Times Square because there was no traffic. I got a text because I was posting this kind of as I was on my way up. And when we got to 72nd and Central Park West, I had the photo in the intersection of, shooting from behind the car with her, the Dakota in the distance. And I had someone text me and say, "Are you laying in the intersection at 72nd and Central Park West?" Yes, I am. Flat on the street. And it kept me from really despairing because it was a rough time for everybody. And some people who didn't live in New York don't realize that we would hear ambulance sirens like 6 times an hour. So for me, having that escape where I could completely take myself out of this time-space continuum and drop myself down in this little tiny world was an escape, and it was also quite a lot of fun.
I can imagine. I mean, I feel like you must have gotten an enormous amount of feedback from people who were really enjoying this process too, following you on Instagram and seeing this story progress, which at the time was good for everybody. So that was a sort of a gift to your followers as well.
So in December, I was talking to the CEO of Taunton. We were having tea, and I said, what would be really fun is like to have a Crazy Bella story, because she follows me on Instagram. Have a Crazy Bella story, but with sewing. And she said, okay. And I sat there and I thought, is that okay? Yes. Or is that okay? I'll think about it. Or is that okay? You're crazy. And she said, well, I'll have my people contact you. So I started, and it was a tight deadline because we wanted to kind of catch the wave of the Barbie movie. It was a June 1st deadline. So even before I had a contract, I thought I have to dig in and I have to start this, because not the large photos, like the cover photos, some of the large page photos Jack Deutsch photographed, but every other photo in that book I photographed. All the little tiny props, the little tiny books, the little tiny cutting mat, the little tiny L squares, all of that I had to make. So it was a heavy lift, I will say. But, we had that June 1st deadline and we turned it in a week early. So, but what was fun, the first part, because I had to kind of plan out, I had a general idea of what the story was going to be. So I had to plan out the outfits that Lola was going to wear. And then middle of April to middle of May was just the photos of the story. And last night I was going over the proofs again, because I just, before I sent it off, and we wanted to look at it again. And so I just thought, I just want to kind of go through the story. I just want to enjoy the story. And when I got through with that story, it was like, yeah, that is good. Because, Lola ends up in a happier place with a new circle of friends, and the bad guy goes to jail. I know it's a spoiler, but, there you have it.
Well, that at least gives people something to look forward to. They don't have to worry about Lola falling off the wagon completely.
No.
So that's good. That's good news. Well, so when you were making these clothes, did you use? I know that you made patterns, but did you use fabrics that you sort of had in your stash? Did you just design a whole wardrobe and go buy fabric for her in the book?
I have lots of little odd bits and pieces of fabric, because at FIT they have a big cardboard barrel that they throw headers and odd bits of fabric in. And, the students, of course, I let them go through it first. But if I see something that looks particularly 1/6 scale worthy, because there are some certain instances, you have to think about certain things. It has to be thin. If it's a pattern, the patterns have to be small in scale, that sort of thing. So the beauty is you don't have to have a lot of fabric. So I have been collecting just bunches of fabric, because when I started making clothes for little Charlie, I didn't have any odd bits and scraps. So I have amassed a whole tiny miniature stash, because in my studio, you can't have a full scale stash. So they were fabrics that I had collected over a period of time.
Well, when you were a child making these clothes, where did you get fabric at that point?
My mother, because everyone's mom when I was a kid sewed. See, my mother would never make boys' clothes because she said they were too hard. When we went through her things after she died, I got the sewing stuff. Looking at her patterns, they were all simplicity. They were, a front, a back, facing, zipper. They were fairly simple. She confessed later that she didn't like it. She did it because she had to. But see, I didn't know it at the time. So when she would cut out something, I would haunt the wastebasket, and anything that she threw in the wastebasket, I would grab. So my first efforts, were crude, as you can imagine. But it gave me the bug. So that's where my first sources of fabric came from.
My mother was actually a dressmaker when I was growing up until I was about 12, maybe. She did that sort of as a part-time thing at home. And I grew up in a small town, but there were enough New Year's Eve parties that people did actually want dresses that would be, unique and fancy. So we had some really good fancy scraps in my house growing up. And not that I used a lot of them for my Barbie, but it was a nice source of things to make clothes. I had a Francie, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It was not really Barbie. We were not allowed to have the actual Barbie. I think she was considered too grown up.
Well, the history of the real Barbie, there was a doll named Lily in Germany. Lily was a cartoon character for a tabloid in Germany. And Lily was, well, let's just say she liked guys who gave her gifts. Some people would call her a call girl. I don't think that was it at all. I think she was just kind of a freewheeling, pretty, curvaceous gal. And that was the inspiration for Barbie. And so a lot of people, when Barbie first came out, were kind of scandalized. But the marketing people at Mattel did some marketing research, and it was a remark that a little girl made to her mother. And she said to her mother, "Look how well groomed she is." So in the original little catalogs, you probably remember this, there was the little bathrobe, terry cloth bathrobe with the little shower cap. There was the comb and the mirror, and there were, like bra and panty sets and all of this. And it was sold as a way for mothers to communicate these things to their daughters. That is how they got around the objections to her very obvious curvaceousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1950s for you, right? And now we used to have patterns for 11.5-inch doll clothes because my mother would make them for my older cousins. By the time we came along, we just got them handed down from the cousins. Did you have patterns back then, or did you just sort of make it from, figuring it out?
Well, some of it was figuring it out. And I don't know if you remember this, but see, my parents were never going to buy these clothes because first off, they were too expensive. They regarded them as too expensive. Secondly, the sissy boy, they were not buying these clothes for the sissy boy. Mm-hmm. But my mother, I remember at the fabric store, they sold yardage that had all the different garment sections printed with seam allowances, and you could cut them out and sew them together. I have some of that yardage. So other than that, really, it was, I kind of learned draping by draping it on Barbie.
That's very cool. As a child, you probably do learn a lot about fabric that way, because you do have to understand that it needs to be thin and probably more fluid than it would need to be for a full-scale human, for anything to drape realistically or desirably. Mm-hmm. I know that my doll had some very stiff and unyielding outfits just because I had only the wrong fabric to use.
And that's how you learn.
That definitely is. And hand sewing and machine sewing and all those different things, working with tiny seam allowances. But one thing that I think is interesting that I have learned working on the most recent article about Lola's palazzo pants, trousers, is that you have a whole different method of making the clothing that doesn't involve the tiny seam allowances. At what point in your process with these doll clothes did you come up with that idea?
Well, in the early 90s, I trained with a woman named Simone in San Francisco. Simone trained at the École Gare Levine in Paris. So she had her diploma from the Gare Levine. She had her certificates from the Chambre Syndicale. She got her immigration to the United States based on her education. They likened it to a master's degree. In 1990, this is where I had to make that decision. Are you a talented amateur, or are you going to go pro? I was in business for 3 years, and I thought I was just going to make accessories because you don't have to make those fit. But people were wanting clothing. I understood, okay, if you're going to be making clothing, you have to know what you're doing. And conceptually, I understood what was going on pattern making wise, but I didn't know the rules. So I signed on with Simone. This is where I learned the idea of you have a marked stitching line and you have a wide seam allowance. She explained that the wide seam allowance is easier to go through the machine. So if you're making little teeny tiny clothes, you've got that 1/4 inch wide seam allowance. That's why a lot of those clothes look homemade, because all of the bias stretched. So the wide seam allowances make it easier, actually, and you pin base stitching line on top of stitching line. So then you get an accurate read of your pattern. Then you can go back and trim out those seam allowances if you need to. So that really started way back then. Some of the ways I use to mark, I believe because it's been a while since I wrote that, we use the friction pens and the silk organza, and you iron it and it leaves a little shadow of a line on the organza. Does that sound familiar?
That is not how you said to do it, but it's okay.
Okay.
You said to just trace through it, but whatever it is, you're transferring the pattern to the organza.
So yes,
somehow.
You want to mark the stitching lines onto the fabric. However, there are different ways that I talk about in the book to do that. And then you start your construction from there. What I found is that then, first off, like I said, they're easier to get through the machine because they're kind of tiny. Also, that's when I learned how to pin things to paper so that you can steer through the machine more easily. And then you trim the seam allowances and do a little seam finish, and you have something that looks much more couture rather than loving hands at home.
Yeah, I found it very fascinating. And I thought anybody who struggled with those little tiny doll clothes when they were a child would wish that they had done it this way. Though I think conceptually for a little kid, it might be hard to kind of get that you're working with, say, a square of fabric with something drawn on it, and then you're going to sew the outline kind of. I think for me, I wouldn't have quite gotten that, even though now it just seems so logical. So I think anybody who's listening and decides to try the projects in this book, you will find it really fascinating and fun. And it seems like something that could carry over to a lot of other aspects of your sewing. I'm thinking about something like, if you have a neckline that you don't want to have it stretch, normally you stay stitch it, but you could just not cut it out at first. You could stay stitch it, leave it uncut until you've gotten ready to put on the facing, and then go ahead and trim when you need to do that. And you preserve a lot of the integrity of the fabric. You don't distort anything. So that's something that you can learn just from making these little teeny weeny clothes. In the example that we are going to have in this coming issue, your way of using organza to provide a lining that also does a lot of the finishing for you is such a smart thing to do. It gives you a better garment, and it is also saves you some finishing that would be tricky.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you said, little kids. This book, I wouldn't recommend for the little kids, but I'd say probably teenagers on up, because, maybe some mothers might kind of look askance, because they're, some of the characters, like the bodyguard, he's a butch guy who wears a blonde wig, but, they might be a little bit puzzled by the, some of the characters, but from, like, say, preteen on up. And I also see this as something that parents, because I'm not just saying the mothers, but the parents can kind of say, show their kids, here's a story, but in this story, we can make these clothes so that your doll too can have the same kind of clothes. Also, one of the things I address in the book is that the sizing of fashion dolls these days, they're not there is the standard 11.5-inch fashion doll from all those years, but we have different figures. We have curvier figures, we have shorter, longer. And one of the things I cover at the end of the book is, this is how you alter these patterns to fit a doll that doesn't necessarily match the norm of Lola. So
that's amazing.
Because, if when you see the book, and I'm excited for you to see it, it's an odd mix of characters. And part of that is we have to honor that those characters are not all cut from the same figure.
Yeah, and I was wondering about that. I think that is the issue with, and this goes into a lot of stuff that I would love to talk to you about to a certain degree, and that is, the standard that Barbie was believed to have set as a, desirable body type for young women or any kind of an adult woman, and that little girls see that and need to grow up to look like Barbie. That now there is a little bit more diversity in what's available to buy for a doll, and it's great to have patterns that can fit those dolls. So it's not the same problem that somebody who needs to have a plus size ready to wear clothing goes out and can't find anything to buy.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. You don't want your doll to have that same problem.
Exactly. Now back to the unrealistic standards issue, which I understand is a thing. When they figured out Lily and then Barbie, the reason the waist is so exaggeratedly small is just scale of fabric. Because if you think about it, when you put a skirt and a blouse on that figure, you've got human scale fabrics around the waist. And when you put the clothes on her, her proportions track more realistically. So it was an optical illusion they were trying to create so that when the doll was dressed, she didn't look like she was just a cylinder. So I understand that has created unrealistic expectations, but I don't think that was the point at the time.
Yes, I have read that too, and that makes good sense to me. And it was also, coming out of the 1950s when people were cinching in their waists more and looking for an hourglass figure. So if you wanted to get that even remotely, you did have to sculpt it in quite small for a really small scale doll. Yeah, no question. I think it's worth remembering that. But yeah, Barbie's still not going to represent most people. And that's kind of the way it is. So here's a question. I don't know if you can answer this. Nobody has been able to answer this for me. But nowadays, the color pink is very much associated with Barbie. And when I was growing up, I don't recall there was pink, but it wasn't universally pink everything. Do you know when that started to happen?
Well, first off, pink in the turn of the 20th century was a man's color. Pink and blue thing kind of flipped. I want to say, Andrew would know more, but I want to say in the 1930s, 1940s,
okay.
Pink was considered a male color at the turn of the 20th century. As far as Barbie, I remember the early script was either in white or it was in pink, but the whole pink, like as her color, I want to say started in the early to mid 70s. I'm not a Barbie historian, so I couldn't nail that accurately. But earlier on, I just remember my friend Jackie gave me her Barbie thermos from like 1960, and I still have it. I love it. The color combination is very sophisticated. It's sort of this kind of taupey beige and this rust brown and this sort of brick red and dark teal. Those are and you don't see that these days. You would not associate that with what we think of as Barbie now. But back in the day, the color combinations were a lot different.
That's true. I'm thinking about a lunchbox that belonged to my older sister. It was called Campus Queen. And I don't know if it was a Barbie branded or just something that was Barbie adjacent, but it was all pink and white.
Mm-hmm.
And this must have been in the mid to late 60s. So that was probably after your thermos, I would think. And I think we started getting those dolls in the early 70s, and there was definitely pink involved, but yeah, not as pervasively as when my daughter, who's 23 now, it was so much pink, so much pink when she was a little girl, and it was everything coming through pink, and it was kind of awful. But that seems to have become the color associated with this particular doll. So I'm guessing that Lola is not a pink girl necessarily.
Lola's not wearing pink. No. The closest she has is the cardigan suit with the little gold chain and the hem, because that's what we do. And that's it's a tweed. It's a linen tweed that has a bit of pink along with the red and the off-white and the metallic threads in it. But that's as close as we get.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a very good decision. Now, in the intro to your book, you mentioned that you learned to knit and crochet also as a young person. Do you still do either of those?
Sadly, no. Knitting and crochet, while I enjoy it, the delayed gratification is too much for me. One time I decided when I was in my 20s, I'm going to knit a sweater. So I knitted the front, I knitted the back, and someone said to me, you should have started with the sleeves, because if you start with the sleeves, you're committed. Because the sleeves are about the same size as the front and back. So I ended up with the best.
Oh, well, see, if you start with the sleeves, then you can't even have a vest. So I kind of disagree with that.
Exactly, but you would be more motivated to finish the whole thing, which for me kind of makes sense. I used to knit socks. There was a pamphlet from the JP Coates company, and I've lost it. Gosh darn it! But it was for socks, and it was, if you followed it line for line with the 4 needles, you had a sock. I turn the heel and all of that. I kind of liked that. I thought that was fun. But again, the delayed gratification is the issue. So I know how to do it. I could probably at some point do it. I might pick it up. I'm not saying I never will do it again, but I like sewing better because you get to see results a little more quickly.
I think I'm kind of on that side of things with you. I mean, I do like knitting, and in the winter I tend to take up knitting a bit, but not anything complicated because I lose track of the pattern almost immediately. It has to be something really simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
The last time I knitted something, my friend Stuart, may he rest in peace, he wanted me to teach him how to knit because he was going through chemotherapy. And so he wanted something to just keep his mind occupied. So by the time I got the knitting needles and the yarn, he was in the hospital. And so I just said, well, you know what? You can watch, I will knit it for you. Because he just, at that point, mentally, he couldn't pick it up. So I just said, so I will knit it for you. So that was one of the things I did in those last days. So he could watch me knit this for him.
Yeah.
And I didn't pay attention to the gauge. And so I ended up with something that didn't look so much like a scarf. It looked more like a bath mat. So my husband, he has a cat named Marvin. So Marvin, in the wintertime, we put the bath mat on Marvin's chair. So he has a nice cozy place to sleep.
For somebody who is an expert in fitting, I can't believe you didn't pay attention to the gauge, but hey, it happens to everybody. So.
And also, there were other things on my mind, like, my friend was dying. So,
and with a scarf, it shouldn't matter, but sometimes it does come out. I actually also made a scarf that turned out enormous, and my cat too wound up with a really nice bed, like a super nice bed. Yeah. So now Lola is very well dressed, and she's quite elegant and sophisticated. But does she ever have downtime? And if she does, what does she wear?
well, she has pajamas. She has great pajamas. She has good lingerie because you have to start a new wardrobe with new underwear because otherwise that's just not proper. The little outfit in the magazine, the little palazzo trousers and the little casual top, that is more of a kind of an at-home lounging around outfit. So she hasn't embraced knits or hoodies or sweatpants or any of that sort of thing.
What about her friends?
Her friends, oh gosh, it's such a mixed bag. My assistant always wears the cardigan suits. That's what she wears. Now, oh God, this was a while ago, but I can see the picture in my head. She had a Christmas party. And so, at the end of the Christmas party, did this whole photo series. At the end of the Christmas party, she's laying on her little bed with her shoes on the floor and the wig taken off with like a little cold cloth on her eyes. She has a bathrobe.
Mm-hmm.
And if she really is kind of wanting to just have downtime, she has like the head wrap. She takes off the wig. We have like little cucumbers to put on her eyes and cold cream. So yeah, she doesn't do it too much she doesn't like to be on camera when she does that, because a girl has to have her privacy.
I agree. And I think anybody who wants to see more things should definitely follow Kenneth at Kenneth D King on Instagram, right? And then you have a Lola Instagram account. Could you tell us what that is?
Yeah, that one is Lola the Showgirl.
Yes,
24.
Definitely watch for that.
So what Lola the Showgirl is, because see, Lola's story and Bella's story intersect at a certain point. So Bella, and so what I've done is I've taken all of the backstory for the blackmail thing for Bella, and I'm filling in some pieces that didn't get into the original story just to kind of, put in the missing pieces. And so Bella is writing a book right now, which is going to be called Fleeing Uphill in High Heels, A Tale of Fear and Hope. And so Lola at one point is going to be helping her with her media tour.
Okay, so
that's where the two stories intersect. So I need, for the people who missed, because this was in 2020, there are a lot of people who weren't following. So if you start at the beginning of Lola the Showgirl 24 and kind of, start at the very beginning and follow along, you can kind of get up to speed on Bella's story. And then closer to when the book comes out, then we're going to really, because I'm teasing Lola here and there in the Lola the Showgirl 24 Instagram account. So you're gonna have the complete information if you go there.
Okay, that's good. That's good for people to know, because it has been a while and I don't remember all the details of this story, but it was a lot of fun to follow. A lot of drama, big drama for small little figures, and a lot of really interesting characters. I will say that the triplets are among my favorites.
For those who have never heard of this, they are the Orloff-Walensky triplets, a rollerblading girl group from Eastern Europe, and they have the mail order husbands because the husbands did arrive in an envelope in the mail.
I just think it's a great concept. And I think that there should be some sequels coming up to this book that's just about to come out. We want to know more about Bella, Crazy Bella, and we want to know what's going on with the Orloff-Walensky
triplets.
Yes, triplets. And then there will always be more, I'm sure, coming up.
Oh, yes.
So, Kenneth, we are coming to time. And of course, I feel that I have to say there's never enough of Kenneth when we're talking. But we will speak again, and I recommend that our listeners keep their eye out for this book, which has a release date of, I'm not sure, do you know, Kenneth, exactly?
For the holidays, that's what I'm told.
That's what I know too, is for the holidays, so keep your eye out for that. I'm sure that there will be some promotion on various social media and probably in e-letters if anybody receives our e-newsletters. So you will know when it's there, and await it with bated breath. And be prepared for a fun read and maybe some really fun sewing over the holidays with anybody who is a fan of dressing up and doesn't get to go out that much. That would be me.
See, there you go.
Well, thank you so much, Kenneth, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you to our guest for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send your comments, questions, and suggestions to th@taunton.com. And please like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're listening. It helps others find our podcast. Until next time, keep on sewing with threads.